Good afternoon, folks. I have today a very interesting rifle to share. This is a Austrian model 1851 called the Kammerkarabiner, and it may be perhaps the worst, maybe silliest carbine of the American Civil War. These were a Austrian design going back to the 1840s, which were originally in what was called the Augustin two-block system. Um, They have a extremely short for caliber, this being a 71 caliber, 14-inch barrel. The original ones from the 1840s were smoothbore, with in the 1850s coming out with a rifle version using the Spitzkugel system. If you want to go check out Paper Cartridge's version to learn a little bit more about that projectile, it's a very early sort of primitive expanding rifle musket projectile that rather than like a mini ball which expands upon firing where the skirt flares out, this one expands upon the loading it, with it needing to really be kind of smashed down into the barrel um, to get that expansion. There's a pillar at the very breech of this that kind of acts like an anvil, where you smash that bullet uh, against this anvil to expand it into the rifling and hopefully have it engage. This would work okay on a long musket, but if we're talking for a cavalry carbine, it's going to be a very difficult thing to actually make expand, especially if you're trying to load it from horseback. It's just getting the leverage on something like that to work would be very difficult. It's a rifle that I think would actually have been better if they had just stuck with the smoothbore version. But when the American Civil War came around, the Union actually imported about 10,000 of these, just being so desperate for arms. And the Confederacy also purchased some. We don't exactly know how many. I believe it was 500 were recovered by blockade runners. An unknown amount would have made it through the blockade. And they were still in use at least through Gettysburg. I believe there's one documented relic one that was found at Gettysburg, probably in Confederate hands at that point. But at least midway through 1863, some folks were still using these things. And I just can't imagine that even with the original ammunition, you're going to get much accuracy out to 100 yards to still be able to hit a man-sized target. Again, this is a 71 caliber carbine with a 14-inch barrel. It's extremely short, probably the shortest type of this weapon that was used during the Civil War. The smoothbore version, probably you wouldn't lose much accuracy by just sticking with a smoothbore while keeping with the versatility of an arm that would still be able to use buck and ball cartridges. But of course, with a lot of these Austrian weapons and other European designs, when the Civil War broke out, we didn't have the right type of ammunition to use for these. A lot of the balls that we would have used were the 69 caliber US regulation, which would have been far undersized for some of these European arms, which went into the 70 caliber. Some ammunition was brought over. I don't exactly remember how much, but likely it wouldn't have been enough to keep these things in the field for more than a little bit of time. So I have to assume that for most of their service, they would have been issued the improper ammunition and just would have been totally ineffective on the battlefield. I suppose maybe having a rifle in somebody's hand is better than none, but these really go back to a time where the saber was still the primary weapon of the cavalrymen, where by the Civil War came around, cavalry was being used differently. It wasn't quite the shock troop that it had been during Napoleon's time and earlier. It was being put more into a scout role, where having that decisive cavalry charge is no longer going to be what's going to decide battles. With rifles and rifled artillery coming out to make those long cavalry charges more and more ineffective as horses will just get shot to pieces. Coming across a field like that, the arms that the cavalrymen needed were changing rapidly, and this would have been far outdated by the time of the Civil War. I mean, it's barely better than a pistol, while you probably still lose some of the maneuverability that you might have had having a single-shot pistol. But they were still being used. So we're going to give this a try. I don't expect much. If we could keep this on paper at 50 yards, and we'll be starting at 25, I have a couple of the Spitzkugels that I can show before we get started. Like I said, Paper Cartridges has a very in-depth video on that. I encourage you to watch that. He has the full-length rifled musket version, which is going to perform, I'm assuming, far better than this will. But we're also going to try a couple different sizes of round balls and just see if we can get anything to stay on paper at 25 and 50 yards. If we can do that, I think this will be a lot of fun to shoot. This could be a very interesting rifle, but I think we will pretty much definitively prove that this was not an effective carbine on the battlefield, especially by the time of the American Civil War and the role that cavalry was going to play. You know, perhaps for something as garrison duty and guarding prisoners, this would have been great. But even going to the rifle version, this going to eliminate. This could have been a great foraging musket, you know, for cavalry on long campaign. But even by going with the rifle version, you can lose that ability as well. Let's give this a try. You know, I think we're just going to have some fun out here and see what we can do. But I don't anticipate much results, but we'll see. All right, our first load that we're going to be doing here is a Spitzkugel style bullet in the original dimensions, loaded over 50 grains of 3F, which is pretty close to the original service carbine load that these would have had in the field. One of the things I noticed is that Spitzkugel went down really, there's a lot of space. This is very undersized for this bore. And with the range rod that I have, because these came with a very special type of ramrod that was not imported during the war. And the ones you actually find that were issued during the war just came from a hodgepodge of different European muskets. And loading with this, the originals had this big tulip bulb kind of head that smashed down on that bullet, the pillar acting like an anvil to really you know, get that crushed in there. Doesn't work with these, and again, really hard to do just with how short this rifle is. So without that big heavy cleaning rod, I couldn't get it to expand like I should have been able to do. I don't know how this is going to turn out. We're probably going to not even hit paper at 50 yards. We'll see. Only one way to find out, I guess. This is probably going to destroy my shoulder. Woo! Yeah, that was something, all right. So I can see at 25 yards with that Spitzkugel, we are about 8 inches high and 6 inches to the left. So not awesome. Like I said, I wasn't expecting much to happen out of that, but at least we were at aiming at paper. We're at the very top left of it. So we're going to try a round ball this time. I'm going to try, because that was so loose. I have some 710 round balls, which I think actually might fit this, if not be a little tight. So that's going to be our next stop here. We'll see if that works. As far as recoil is concerned, though, that was actually pretty manageable. That didn't hurt me at all. So we'll give a larger round ball a chance to see what that could do. All right, so actually with the round ball, just a plain round ball, no hatch, we're actually not doing too bad. There is 2 ball holes right here and another one right here at 25 yards. That's pretty impressive. That's actually a lot better than I thought was going to happen here. This was our Spitzkugel round here. So our point of aim is right here, right at sort of the bottom of the yellow center of the target here. So that's where we are at 25 yards. We can compensate for that. That's okay. Yeah, I'm going to try it with a... probably just a foil patch, just to see if that holds some of the lubrication a little bit better. Even 3 shots in, you could kind of see some fouling. I didn't grease these balls. I'm just kind of squirting them with ballastol before I load them down there. I didn't have time to do any greasing. Honestly, for 25 yards, that's not so bad. We will probably move it back to 50 here in a few minutes. I'll probably take one more shot with this just to see what it's like with the foil, and then we'll move it back. All right, we're now going to move on to 50 yards. I am toning the powder charge down to 45 grains. We know we have a pretty good ball fitment as it is, so I don't think I really need to be shooting a full 50. And this may even bring the point of impact down a little bit. If I see a drastic decrease in accuracy, we can always bump it back up. We're going to give 45 grains of 3F at 50 to 55. We are still using a 715 round ball with a sort of a patch of aluminum foil wrapped around it to kind of hold that ballastol lube in as best as possible. And sort of act like a little bit of a wad. So here goes nothing. I'm going to use the same point of impact. It might be on the target above it. We'll see, but that's why I have 2 seconds. Okay, so here we are at 50. I took 5 or 6 shots. Actually, I lost count. I definitely have 4 on target. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. So these 2, I was using the ball with the patch, or the foil patch on it. This one and this one were just a naked round ball just going down the barrel. So, I mean, not a huge appreciable difference
45 grains of powder, and then these two were 50 grains of powder. I mean, ultimately, I'm able to keep this thing sort of on paper at 50 yards, which is, I mean, you're basically shooting a 71 caliber pistol with a rifle stock here. So I'm not, you know, too totally upset with that. And the fact that I'm able to use the 75 or the 74 round balls is pretty great. All right, so actually not a bad start to using this rifle. We were able to keep it relatively on paper, or sort of a predictable manner, at both 25 and 50 yards. And I'm happy that I'm able to use the 715 round ball mold that I use for my brown vest, so I don't actually have to go out and buy a whole other mold for it, to keep it in, you know, reasonable shooting, just for fun kind of distances. We'll probably come back and try it with some proper sized real cloth patch material. I think that will work better than the aluminum foil patches that were working. But, you know, some more experimentation with this. If we could keep this thing shooting 6-inch groups at 50 yards, that'll be awesome. I could actually bring this hunting, and maybe even take a deer with it later this year. So we'll do a little bit more experimenting, but that's a great start in my opinion. This did better than I thought it was going to. Stay tuned for more.